Understanding civil wars in the modern world, causes, impact, and solutions. From the Middle East to Africa, and even parts of Europe and Asia, civil wars continue to shape the global political landscape. But what exactly are civil wars? Why do they happen? Where do they occur most often, and how can we solve this growing crisis in the modern world? In today's video, we'll dive deep into the causes, impacts, and possible solutions to civil wars, backed by insights from global institutions and leading think tanks. Civil war is defined as an armed conflict between organized groups within a country, typically the government and one or more groups seeking to overthrow it or secede. Unlike international wars, civil wars involve people of the same nation, making them particularly destructive to societies. According to the Uppsala Conflict Data Program, UCDP, over 95% of wars in the last 30 years have been internal conflicts or civil wars, not wars between countries. Why do civil wars happen? Why do civil wars occur? The reasons are complex and often interconnected, but we can break them down into several key factors. Political instability and power struggles. Many civil wars are rooted in political struggles. When governments fail to maintain legitimacy, enforce laws fairly, or represent their population, civil wars can erupt. Syria's civil war, for example, began as protests against the authoritarian regime of President Bashar al-Assad. Economic inequality and poverty. Poor economic conditions and inequality are major drivers of internal conflict. The Democratic Republic of Congo's civil war, for instance, is often attributed to the exploitation of resources by a small elite while the majority of the population remains in extreme poverty. Ethnic, religious, or sectarian divisions. Divisions within societies based on ethnicity or religion often exacerbate tensions. In countries like South Sudan, deep-rooted ethnic divides have been a central factor in the outbreak of violence. External interference. Sometimes civil wars are fueled by external powers providing financial or military support to one side. The Libyan civil war saw various countries supporting different factions, complicating the resolution process. Climate change and resource scarcity. Yes, even climate change plays a role. The United Nations has warned that resource scarcity, particularly water, has contributed to conflicts in places like Sudan and Somalia, where droughts and famine aggravate pre-existing tensions. Fact. A report by the International Crisis Group shows that in over 60% of civil wars, a combination of economic disparity and political corruption is a significant trigger. When and where are civil wars happening today? Visual maps highlighting current civil war zones: Yemen, Syria, South Sudan, Myanmar, and Ethiopia. So, where are civil wars happening today? Let's take a look at some of the most severe conflicts. Yemen. One of the worst humanitarian crises, Yemen's civil war, has raged since 2014. A fight for control between the Houthi rebels and a Saudi-backed government has led to famine, disease, and over 230,000 deaths, according to the UN. Syria. Syria's civil war, which began in 2011, has caused untold suffering, with over 500,000 deaths and millions displaced. The complex proxy war involving regional and global powers has turned the country into a battleground. South Sudan. The youngest country in the world, South Sudan plunged into civil war just 2 years after gaining independence in 2011. Ethnic violence and political instability have caused widespread displacement and death. Myanmar. After a military coup in 2021, Myanmar descended into civil conflict. The military's crackdown on pro-democracy protesters has led to thousands of deaths and ongoing guerrilla warfare. Ethiopia. The conflict between the Tigray region and the Ethiopian government has escalated into full-blown civil war, resulting in tens of thousands of deaths and a humanitarian disaster. Fact. According to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, more than 70,000 conflict-related fatalities occurred in these countries in 2023 alone. Visual, refugee camps, destroyed cities, and footage of famine and displacement. The impact of civil wars is profound and long-lasting, affecting not just the people directly involved, but entire regions. Humanitarian crisis. Civil wars often result in mass displacement, with millions of people becoming refugees or internally displaced. The United Nations estimates that over 82 million people were displaced globally in 2023, many of them due to civil conflicts. Economic collapse. War destroys infrastructure, disrupts trade, and drains a country's economy. For example, Syria's economy has shrunk by over 75% since the war began. Social fabric breakdown. Civil wars tear apart the social fabric of nations. Trust is eroded, and communities are polarized, sometimes for generations. This makes post-war recovery extremely difficult. Regional and global instability. Civil wars often spill over borders, creating refugee crises and drawing in neighboring countries. The Syrian war, for instance, destabilized much of the Middle East and contributed to the European migrant crisis. Fact. The World Bank estimates that conflict-related destruction reduces a country's GDP by an average of 2% to 8% per year during civil wars. What can be done? Solutions to civil war. Visual, peace negotiations, UN missions, rebuilding efforts. Now that we've explored the causes and consequences of civil wars, the big question remains, what can be done to prevent and resolve them? Inclusive governance. Ensuring that governments are inclusive, fair, and representative can help mitigate the political tensions that often lead to civil war. Institutions like the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, promote this by strengthening democratic processes worldwide. Economic development and resource management. Addressing economic inequalities and ensuring fair resource distribution are essential. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank are key players in supporting war-torn countries to rebuild their economies post-conflict. Mediation and diplomacy. Peace negotiations led by neutral parties, such as the UN or African Union, have been instrumental in ending many conflicts. In South Africa, the transition from apartheid was made possible by diplomatic negotiations and international support. Post-war reconciliation. After a civil war, rebuilding trust and fostering reconciliation is critical. Truth commissions, such as the one in Rwanda after the genocide, can help societies heal and move forward. Climate resilience and adaptation. As climate change continues to fuel conflicts, improving access to resources like water and promoting climate resilience in vulnerable regions can reduce the likelihood of future civil wars. Fact. According to the Global Peace Index, countries that invest in good governance and economic development are 40% less likely to experience internal conflict. Civil wars are some of the most devastating events a nation can face, but with the right approaches, addressing political instability, economic inequality, and resource scarcity, solutions are possible. It's up to the global community to ensure that peace and stability can become a reality for all. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth discussions on global issues. Let's spread awareness and work together for a more peaceful world.